All right, now we're going to talk about logic statements, logical reasoning. Um, Also, what most of this unit is all about is conditional statements. So I'm going to ask you to follow along in your notes. This is on page 44. And let's get going here. Conditional statements, as we are already starting with the conditional statements, are commonly written in this form. If something were to happen, then something follows. Okay. So the conditional statement is usually known as the original if-then statement. So something doesn't necessarily have to start as a conditional statement. We turn it into a conditional statement using if then, okay, inserting that. So this statement here, if today is Monday, then yesterday was Tuesday, we could have just said today is Wednesday and yesterday was Tuesday. It could have just started with that. And if I asked you to turn it into a conditional, you just insert if, then, and go with that. Right, continuing. So this would be a conditional statement. Why? Because of the if then part. And there's usually a comma, but what's important is that you have your hypothesis, which we use the letter P for. So whatever follows the if, that is the hypothesis, and whatever follows the then is what we know as the conclusion. Okay. So those are the two parts there. And in this unit, this chapter, we use P, Q a lot, P and Q. So this is the logic notation. This statement we would translate to something like this, where you have P and then arrow Q. All right, that's the logic notation for this statement. So if today was Wednesday, then yesterday was Tuesday. That's what I start with. So the arrow stands for the then, or actually, if you see the arrow, you can just imagine that this is a if-then statement. Okay. In order to determine the veracity, whether or not it's true, of the original statement, we dig a little deeper by forming, here it is, converse, inverse. Right? So there's the converse statement, there's an inverse conditional statement, there's the contrapositive, and last but not least, there's the biconditional. And you're probably thinking, what, right? Well, we'll explore this a little further. Converse, you basically flip the hypothesis and the conclusion. It's like you just flip it. So if we started with if P then Q, now we're going to read it exactly the opposite. Notice how it flips. If Q then P. All right. So we take the original. So I'll actually say if yesterday was Tuesday. So sometimes you have to kind of adjust the statement a little bit for it to sound good. Okay. If yesterday was Tuesday, comma, then today is Wednesday. Okay, so that's, we flipped it. So essentially, this part, which is Q, is first, and then P is next. So that's what we would call converse. And maybe I will say that later too. A con artist, like you're disguising, right? You're not who you really are. So whenever you see that prefix con, we're flipping something. Something needs to be flipped. Okay. So there we go. So that's the logic notation, and this is actually the statement rewritten. That's the converse. Next, the inverse. And don't panic just yet, okay? But there are actually three ways of stating the inverse using logic notation. And that's just because like different textbooks and even the province. I just need you to see that and just know when there's some sort of symbol on top or in front of the letter, that means not. Okay, so think of not here in this when it comes to inverse. So what is an inverse statement? Negate the hypothesis and the conclusion of the original conditional statement. To negate, we simply add the word not in front of each part. So I would actually say you got to insert it somehow so that it sounds right. So again, we have to, there was the converse, right? Converse, we got to go back to the original and we're just going to negate the hypothesis and negate the conclusion. So we're going to say, if today is not Wednesday, then yesterday was not Tuesday. That's how we would make that statement. So here we go. I'm going to give myself enough space so I don't run out. If today, if today, so back to the original conditional statement. If today is not, there it is, not Wednesday, comma, then yesterday was not Tuesday. And to be honest, even if it doesn't sound quite right and you stick a not in there, you're probably going to get the marks, all right? So logic notation, and this is how you would actually write it. So how would this be an example? It could be like this, okay? I could give you a statement saying, if today is Wednesday, then yesterday was Tuesday. And then I could say, write this, okay? Write this. Given that this is P and that's Q, write this statement, a statement that shows this. And you'd be like, oh, it's still P and Q in that order. The arrow tells me it's if then, but the two bars there is the not, or the two little, I don't know what symbol that is, what you call that in and of itself, but that's a not. And then you have the squiggly in front that's also a not. Okay. So I just want you to be aware of that. So you would just rewrite it like this. Okay. And on my study sheet, I would probably just have inverse, just say maybe not both parts, and then maybe have this logic statement right next to the inverse. And same with converse. You have Q, P like that. So I would start with actually the conditional statement is just a PQ. Then the converse is Q, then P. Inverse is not P. If not P, then not Q. Right? And now the contrapositive here. Flip. So again, there's the con, which means flip every time. So contrapositive is we flip and we negate. All right, so from the original being P then Q, we will do two things. We will flip them, so the order reverses, and we put a not in front of both. So this is how the statement would sound, or write. This is how we would write it. If yesterday was not Tuesday. Okay, so this is Q, but not Q, right? Then today is not Wednesday. Okay, and there it is, flipped and a not inserted. Sometimes you're going to have to put it in front. It depends on the statement. Okay. Last but not least is the biconditional. And just keep in mind, we haven't really looked at whether or not the statement is true or false. We're going to look at that shortly. So the biconditional statement, basically we substitute if and only if. That's what you gotta write your statement as. Okay, you substitute if and only if into the statement. The statement is only true if the original and the converse are true. Okay, so we're gonna highlight that part. It's very important. In other words, right, you must not have any counter examples. Okay, i.e., like for both statements to be true, you cannot find any counter examples to that argument. And because of that, if you could find one instance where the statement does not hold its veracity, it does not become a biconditional statement. So how would you write the first one? You would actually just write it like this. Today, this is P, remember? Today is Wednesday. If and only if yesterday was Tuesday. There it is. If and only if. So how did we make this happen? We basically got rid of the if in front of P and the then in front of Q and just inserted if and only if into that statement. Okay. So that's a biconditional. Let's continue on page 45 or the next page. And here it is. So basically to summarize what we've just learned, I'm going to ask you, this is basically what I would think should be on your study sheet, but do not, I repeat, do not use up too much space for this. Okay, but there's your conditional, your converse, remember con is flip, your inverse, it means not P then not Q. So I don't know if I would have this there. I would probably just have the symbols there. Contrapositive, right? You flip again the con. I don't know if you want to have that. You for sure flip it when you see con, right? But I don't want you to think, oh, it says flip, just flip. You look at this to tell you, right? You're flipping and you're negating. And by conditional, the arrow goes both ways. Did I add that on the previous page? Yes, I did. Okay, sorry, I didn't emphasize that the arrow goes both ways. And you'll see sometimes, or you'll hear someone giving a lecture or a state or maybe a podcast or something. They say the converse is also true, right? So it's going one way and the other way if you rephrase that statement, okay? And here's the prefix con, means switch or flip. Being a con artist. And so here, I want you to try rewriting the following statements. That's going to be your homework, okay? So I'll help you out with the first one. You try write the following conditional statements into converse, inverse, contrapositive, and biconditional. And what I want to add here is that this is already a conditional right here. Okay, so this is my conditional. I have had some exams in the past where they actually just give you a statement and they want you to turn it into a conditional statement. So for example, it may have just read Sandra cleans her room and her mom does not get upset. Something like that. There's no if and then inserted. So if you want to turn it into a conditional, a condition needs to be met for, right, for the second part to be true or false. So this is the P and that's the Q, right? So we insert if then. Anyways, this is already a conditional. So now we're going to turn it into a converse. Remember, converse, con, we're just going to flip P and Q. And for, in this instance, if, after if, that part is P, and whatever comes after then, that part is Q on the original. So if we want to write the converse of this statement, you're flipping it. So I will say if Sandra's mom does not get upset. Here's if Sandra's mom does not get upset, comma, then Sandra cleans her room. Just enough space. Okay, that's how you would write it. The inverse. What is the inverse? So you probably go up on your study sheet, look at inverse, and it says not P and not Q. So you essentially leave the order, it's just you insert a not into both parts. Okay, so if Sandra does not, right, does not clean her room, so you have to do some, you have to change it up a little bit to sound good, okay? Then Sandra's mom does not get upset, will not. Oh, here's something that, yeah, I did this on purpose. If you negate something that already has a not in front of it, it actually turns, it's almost like double negative, turns positive. So then you would say, then Sandra's mom gets upset in this case. Will get upset. So not getting upset, right, is the equivalent of a negative times a negative, which is positive. So you're like, what? How does that rule make its way into language? And it actually does, right? So in this case, because of that not, okay, we're introducing, if the mom does not get upset, then in fact she does get upset. Okay. And if you read the statement, it kind of does make sense. If she does not clean her room, then the mom will get upset, right? So it does make sense within the context. But anyhow, that's how you would go about it. Contrapositive. So the con tells me we're flipping. So it's P then Q, Q then P, and negating as well. That's what happens with a contrapositive. So here we go. We need to negate. So if Sandra's, why did I have to start you off with the double negatives, right? But here it is. If Sandra's mom does get upset, because it's again the not, comma, then Sandra does not clean her room. Okay, and the biconditional, you go back, always go back to the original, okay? Always. When you're flipping, everything's like, okay, there's PQ, okay? I have to flip it and negate. Always base it on the original conditional. Biconditional. Sandra cleans her room if and only if her mom does not get upset. I will just say mom does not get upset. Okay, there it is. And so I want you to try rewriting all of these examples. It's a very good practice, okay? One more thing that I will say, I'm not sure if I make sure that you understand that. I will say it already here, so I hope you watch this right to the end. But it turns out that the converse and the contrapositive have the exact same, you're actually saying the exact same thing when you're mentioning these two, the conditional, the original, and its contrapositive version. You're saying the exact same thing. And converse as well as inverse are also, they have the same veracity, same. So I do say it later on, I just checked, but maybe we'll add that here. The conditional and the contrapositive, same veracity. Same veracity, and these two as well. Same veracity, and I can explain that later after you're done this, okay? And I'll scan the key and I'll post it. Thank you very much.